when I graduated, I wasn't known as much of a speaker. I think Sheikh Muhammad would bear testimony to that. When I did the first program on the radio, I think many of the Asatidha got a shock and they felt that, this guy only had a loud mouth in the class. But I wasn't one who gave many bayans, and generally when you're studying, you see amongst the students who has enthusiasm for public speaking. What had happened was that I was doing the tafsir after Tarawih Salah in one of the masjid, in my local masjid, and the radio station had come for an outside broadcast of the Tarawih Salah, and the technician had heard my tafsir, and he went back to the station manager and said, no, perhaps this guy is a good candidate. And they told me to try it out for a short while, and the rest, as they say, is history. And 13 years later, alhamdulillah, I'm still doing that particular program. Now, I was apprehensive when I was asked to do the program, and primarily because a morning drive time program focuses extensively on political issues, local politics as well as international politics. And I thought that as a Maulvi, as a Moulana, as a Sheikh, as a scholar, yes, hadith, tafsir, those kind of things we can do. And they have those slots, at other times in the day. But what am I going to do in this drive time program where, you have to discuss politics? I know nothing about politics. We didn't read much of the newspapers, the sector whilst we were studying. But one of my ustads told me, no, that just go. You'll understand the wisdom of it a little later. And what I did was that the host that was hosting the program prior to me, he was not an alim, but he was very clued up with the political issues of the day. So he would only discuss politics. And some people who didn't have that degree of interest in politics found the program to be very boring. And others loved it because they had an interest in politics. So what I tried to do was do both. And I took every half hour and I segmentized it in such a way that you would have a hadith discussion for about 7 or 8 minutes and then immediately followed by a political interview. And alhamdulillah, till today, till 13 years later, that format is still a winning format for drive time in Muslim media in South Africa. Actually, the other Muslim radio stations have started to adopt that particular format. And there were raised eyebrows because people were asking the question, how are you putting a Maulana into a drive time slot? What will he know about political issues? And the truth be told, I knew nothing about political issues when we started. But taking the plunge forced me to start reading. And I had to read extensively, up to 2 hours, 3 hours a day. Read newspapers, read magazines, read analysis pieces, follow the news internationally. And this was in the days prior to Twitter and this kind of instant messaging that makes it so much easier these days. You have to look for hard material all the time. And not on more than one occasion I thought to myself, what am I doing? Because you don't get the same sort of enjoyment when you're reading a news article about, say, Donald Trump's presidency and what it would mean for the Muslim world as compared to if you open up a book of tafsir and something stands out for you there, a very good nukta or a point, and you never thought about that internal satisfaction that you get. However, I stuck at it because that was the mashwara, that was the hukam, that was the instruction of our seniors. And what happened? I'm sharing this because I want to explain to you how I think it has benefited me personally and the kind of impact that it has had. What has happened is one of my ustads said to me at the outset, he said, you'll see that if you can make a success of this particular program, people will have a different kind of respect for ulama. Because there is this perception, there's a stereotype, if you want to call it that ulama are only good at having the traditional discussions. They can give the Jummah talk, but then also on very specific types of topics, and they can perform the nikah and the janazah and one or two other things. But when it comes to contemporary issues, that is not the forte of ulama. Ulama are not equipped. And it took time. I mean, 13 years is a fairly long period of time. But alhamdulillah, there came a time where now, what I'm using these labels very loosely, people who were anti-ulama have actually come out and said that, this is perhaps one of the best journalists that we have in Muslim media in South Africa, but there's no journalist degree. There's no training whatsoever. It's just using the very tools that we had learned without realizing that we had learned within the alim course that we went through, and implementing that, coupled with a lot of hard work. I don't want to lie. But it came with a lot of benefit because it opens up your own mind. It makes you understand contemporary realities, and then you draw from what you have learned and you can inject then the Islamic perspective. And what has become now drive time on Muslim radio in South Africa is you get that direct dosage of spirituality in the form of your tafsir and your hadith and those kind of discussions. But now people prefer, there was a time when they said, we would listen to Radio Islam and then we must go to the mainstream stations to get the latest news. But now, you're getting the latest news and you're getting a spiritual dose, and on top of it, you're getting the Islamic perspective to what's happening in the world. So for example, everyone else will tell you what's the latest that Donald Trump has said. And, they'll basically be shocked about it. How can you say a thing like that? But a Muslim radio station will be able to tell you, okay, this is what Donald Trump has said. This is the political analysis of it. But hey, this is not something which is new to us from a seerah perspective. What are the lessons from seerah on how to deal with a individual, a leader, a political leader like Donald Trump? So the talk I'm going to be giving on Friday at Masjid Al-Quds in Cape Town, because when I leave here, I'm going straight from here to Cape Town. The State of the Nation address is the main speech that the president gives annually in the beginning of the year. And immediately after that, this is the topic they chose. You see, this is how you start becoming viewed as an alim, and this is the intention why I'm sharing this with you. The masjid people chose the topic that this scholar is coming to our masjid this Friday. He will speak to us on how we should seize the opportunity in the crisis that is a result of the Trump presidency. From the Sunnah and the Seerah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So, a purely political discussion, but with an Islamic perspective. Drawing from the knowledge that we have, the classical, traditional, whatever other terms we want to use. So that has been, for me, I would say that getting involved in Muslim media, that has been a tremendous benefit. Because it forces you. It's not like a Jummah Bayan where you have 6 days to prepare. To be able to deliver on the 7th day. And if you're speaking at different venues, then you can even repeat some of the talks. And there's nothing wrong in repeating the talks. But here you have to come every day and speak. Every single day. You have to come with something fresh, you have to come with something new. So it forces you to read, something that I think it's a sickness in the fraternity of scholars. To this extent that alhamdulillah, in the last elections now that we had ulama, myself and a number of other ulama from Radio Islam. We were the moderators and we were the chairpersons for the town hall debates that were taking place at the time of elections. So all the politicians were coming and sitting around the table and we were moderating the discussion, asking the questions and controlling the interaction from the floor. And I have a friend of mine, so he's one of those people who never had a very favorable opinion of ulama. And he's probably about 62, 63 years of age, and he shook his head. He said, never in my life did I envisage seeing an alim chairing a town hall debate with regards to the elections. And electoral issues. So, obviously, I mean, not every alim or not every scholar will go down this particular path, and it's not necessary to do so. Our strength will still lie in the masajid, in the makatib, in the education structures and institutes. And many of our scholars, male and female, will service those particular lines of khidmah, and so it should be. That's going to be the strength. It always will be the strength. It's the foundation. But these are contemporary realities. Because if you are not there to shape the hearts and minds of people, you leave a vacuum and somebody else will do it. And I'm not even talking here about non-Muslims. That's a different debate. Right now I'm only focusing on Muslim media. So where you have a Muslim audience. We're not talking about mainstream media and where you have a non-Muslim audience. That's a different discussion, and I'll touch on that a little later. But the reality was this, that we have many housewives, for example, in South Africa. They were all listening to Radio Lotus, where it was Indian music. Or Radio 702, where you were listening to agnostic presenters talking about a very humanist kind of lifestyle. And it was having an impact, even though that woman may have been in hijab, or she may have been, punctual with the salah. But subconsciously, it has an impact on your psyche, because radio especially, more so than any other medium, you don't require undivided attention. If you want to watch television, you can't do anything else. You can't drive, you can't cook, you can't work. But radio does not require undivided attention. That's why you'll see industry research will tell you, television is strong between 5 p.m. in the afternoon and 10 p.m. in the evening. But radio is strong from 6 to 5. In the evenings, television is stronger. But look at the duration. So radio will never substitute, Muslim media will never substitute in terms of spirituality, the spiritual impact of a chest-to-chest dialogue or discussion. Like that will happen in the classroom, or that will happen in the masjid. Never. Because that is the way of the Anbiya alayhi salatu wasalam, and that should be there. But what happens in between? Today people in the main only have a relationship with the masjid restricted to Fridays. And then also who listens to the Jummah in its entirety, what percentage? So what happens in between? Where are people getting their inspiration from? Where are they getting their perspective and understanding of what's happening in the world? If we don't enter that space, somebody else will enter that space. Somebody whose thinking and outlook we may not be comfortable with, or otherwise non-Muslims. And that was the reality in South Africa until Muslim media came. Actually, Muslim media strengthened the voice of the ulama. I'll give you one example. There was an Islamophobe, a journalist, and he wrote an article targeting prominent families who he knew are the families that were the providing the funding for many of the Darul Ulooms and the NGOs and the institutes, and he tried to link them to terrorist activities. Obviously, he was being funded, and there was an obvious intention behind this, because eliminate these families, compromise them in the eyes of the government, and you've compromised the institutes that they fund. So, mainstream media being mainstream media, this guy was getting interviews all over the show. His research was half-baked, would be an overstatement. There was just nothing there, but he was hyping it, and the media were just taking it. And everybody gave him a free ride until he had to be interviewed on Radio Islam. And with the grace of Allah Ta'ala, he was dissected to such an extent he lost his job. He lost his job. It was either him or the editor, because that research was really not worth the paper that it was written on. And when he lost his job, it was a huge knock for those who were trying to propagate a particular kind of narrative. They were trying to push a particular kind of narrative against the Muslims. So if you don't have your own, and I'm not saying Muslim media in South Africa is as strong as mainstream media, far from it, but you have your own voice, and these things, everything goes viral. You can conduct an interview today and you load it up as a podcast and anybody can access it anywhere. That interview went viral, and even the mainstream shut up after that, because now this man was discredited. They didn't affirm what he was saying, but neither did they give him a tough ride, because it was not of relevance to them what he was saying. It was of relevance to us, of great relevance, and because we had the platform and we had the personnel, we could do it. Today, we all talk about the Ummah being under attack, and there's no doubt about it. Physically, we are under attack, and it pulls at the chords of emotions when we talk about what's happening in places like Syria and Palestine and elsewhere. But just ask yourself the question that the victims of that physical attack, as much as we feel for them, and rightfully so, they are in a position of advantage. Because you lose your life, and it's the rank of martyrdom. You lose your property and you're getting rewarded by Allah. But there's another kind of attack that's being unleashed against the Ummah, and that's the intellectual attack. The Zahni Irtidad, intellectual apostasy, where Muslims are, as a result of the climate, the environment, mainly via the media as a vehicle, you suffer from a complex at best, or your iman is compromised at worst, because of this intellectual attack against Islam and Muslims, where the concepts of the deen, the teachings of the deen are demonized, trivialized, where you are made to feel that, you know what you are practicing upon is archaic, it's not relevant, it's not something that you can utilize. Now the victims of that onslaught, they are not in a position of advantage. We worry a lot about the victims of the physical onslaught, and justifiably so. I don't want to trivialize that, and we spend a lot of our money and a lot of our resources and a lot of our energies in trying to combat that, and so we should. But what about these victims? And it's a much slower process. It's a silent poison. It's like a cancer that's eating up from within. You don't know that it's there until it's too late, and then there's very little that you can do about it. And that's why being in Muslim media, it allows you the opportunity to shape a mindset. Because day in and day out, people driving to work, coming back from work, they are listening to you, they are listening to you, they are listening to you. Don't have an impact immediately. You don't have that same spiritual strength as the mimbar or the direct, teacher to student kind of discourse. But it has that ability to develop a mindset over a period of time. And together with that, when ulama are involved in such a space, there's another kind of respect, because people realize that now you are in sync with contemporary realities. And this is what people want. Today, people don't want to hear about what worked in yesteryear. They want you to tell them how that worked and how it can still work today. And you can only do that if you yourself are in sync with contemporary realities. And media then forces you to do that. So, in a nutshell, alhamdulillah, that I think was some of the benefits that, looking back now, it comes with a lot of stress. It comes with a lot of stress because whatever you're saying is under a microscope. You have your own teachers listening to you. You have your own seniors listening to you. People watch out for your grammar. People watch out for how you read the Arabic hadith. People watch out for everything. And there's no shortage of critics, as much as there's a lot of praise that goes with this kind of work. But it's hugely satisfying, because it broadens your own horizons. It deepens your own research, and it forces you to keep your finger on the pulse of what's happening, not only to the Ummah, but what's happening around the globe. I'll just say one or two things about mainstream media. Perhaps one day in your life it will be of help to you. But that's a different discussion on its own. Because we've been, alhamdulillah, the Muslim media then becomes a training ground. Because today what happens, you have a situation in say UK, for example, now somebody needs to step up and talk on BBC or wherever else. Some people, Allah has given them this natural talent and they can hold themselves, they can hold their own. But not everybody has that natural talent. It's not only about how articulate you are or how good a voice you have. It's a very complex game these days, because propaganda is a very complex thing. and these presenters are highly trained. They know how to shape the narrative. They know how to put, how to kind of marginalize the context and bring the peripheral issues and make it look like the main issues. But Muslim media gives you this training, and alhamdulillah, whatever the Jamiat has done, required for people to step up and go into mainstream media and talk about ISIS recruitment in South Africa and that kind of thing, very touchy, very sensitive issues, you are able to step up. And the main thing you need to remember when you're engaging with mainstream media, don't think about that person whose mind is already made up. Many times we make that mistake. Why? When we think about that person, a Trump-like person, let me put it that way. I don't think Trump really believes in what he's saying, but he's saying it because he knew it would resonate with a particular group of people, and it didn't, and that's why he's in the White House, and now he needs to follow through on it. But that type of a person, an Islamophobe, a kind of right-wing extremist person, when you speak in mainstream media, don't address that person, because when you start doing that, you become very aggressive, you become very emotional. You need to be addressing the person who's sitting on the fence, the person who doesn't know better. The person is like, okay, I got a Muslim neighbor, I work with Muslims, they're not so bad, but hey, I'm checking here about slaughtering people alive and burning people alive, so little bit this way, little bit that way. So what you need to reflect when you come on mainstream media, firstly, is calmness. You need to show the akhlaq of Islam. You need to show the beauty of Islam, no matter what the topic is. Very calm, very serene, and then you need to explain certain basic principles of the deen without getting emotional, no matter what is being thrown at you or how it is being thrown at you. Going in there and getting hot under the collar and getting flustered and wanting to drive on the point, even though the point is very valid, and even though the emotion may be justified, it's not winning you any fans with the majority, and the majority are the ones sitting on the fence. They're just simply confused. They're too lazy, or they're too caught up in the rat race of life to read, to study, to seek an understanding from Muslims directly, so they just become victims of what is thrown at them from the media. But at the same time, they have a sense of fairness, a sense of justice deep down, which if you can tap into, makes a big difference. That helps to shape the narrative. And you also need to show the logic behind many of the concepts of deen. Make it relatable. Try and draw those comparisons. But the main thing is, when any person, whether it is on BBC and a TV station or a radio station, or whether you are engaging, like sometimes it happens to me on the plane, the person is non-Muslim and you look at the way I'm dressing and you start, but hey man, why do you people put your women folk in those tents? And he's asking out of genuine interest. Now you can get all defensive and tell him, well, how do the nuns dress? And why do you put the nuns also under those tents? But if at that time you need to win the person over with the akhlaq of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, make your points, but make it in such a way that you win the argument and you win the person, not in such a way that you win the argument but you lose the person. Because in the end of the day, we are only as strong as the environment will allow us to be. I think we are in the UK. You understand that more than anyone else. Obviously, direct intervention from Allah, that we know, and the power of Allah we know. But one is qudratullah and one is sunnatullah, and the systems that are playing out are indeed concerning. So we need to position ourselves very strategically. So as much as it's important for ulama, and not only for ulama, but for the resources of the Muslim community to go towards the masajid, to go towards the makatib, to go towards the Muslim schools and other institutes that have been there, we need to allocate the best of our youth, and we need to allocate a fair share of our resources and our talent towards media. Both Muslim media as well as mainstream media. And lastly, I'll say this. I know every country has its own dynamics. In South Africa, the regulations are perhaps much more lax, so you can have your own radio stations throughout the year. Yeah, it's only Radio Ramadan or whatever. But today, media has become anything. Really, I mean, if you've got a cell phone, if you're on Twitter, if you're on Instagram, you're on Facebook, you're on social media. It's another form of media, but it's definitely there. And we've seen how social media has benefited us. On the Palestinian issue, the narrative is no longer controlled by CNN and Fox and others to the extent that it used to be controlled before. So we need to understand the advantages in these mediums, which are in our palms on a daily basis, and utilize it to our advantage, and see how we can strategically position ourselves and use this, understanding that it will always be a subsidiary medium. It will never substitute. It's never meant to substitute the traditional or the original mediums, but it's very potent and it's very effective in terms of our contemporary situations. And those are just a few words in terms of experience and thoughts. Whatever is correct is from Allah, and whatever is incorrect, and it's from myself.